So, new podcast in the description. I spoke on what I want to see happen in this NBA offseason, not what I necessarily think will happen, in terms of like LeBron, Kawhi, Paul George, and all that. I did a small review for Deadpool 2, and then my takeaways, disappointments, anticipations after E3. So the draft is real close. We got, 2 days, Thursday night, before we all start going, why the hell did Team A draft this player? And I have a suspicion that I'll be saying that towards the top of the draft when Luka Doncic falls. And one player that he could potentially fall for, although it seems like that's probably not going to happen, but I want to talk about him anyway, is Jaren Jackson Jr., a big guy who I think is a bit of a contrast from some of the other bigs at the top of the draft. DeAndre Ayton is a powerhouse who's going to dunk on people's heads, grab rebounds, and get in the low post, hopefully hit some threes, and defensively he's going to have to work at it. Marvin Bagley is an athlete who's going to be able to score and do stuff in transition and catch alley-oops. And then you got Mo Bamba, who theoretically is a new age center, but it's going to take some time, right? I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is in this weird spot where he's a safer bet than Mo Bamba, to me. He's a safer bet than all of them, really. But he perhaps does not have as high of a ceiling, just because I don't know if he's going to be able to ever put up 20 to 25 points a game the way that, let's say, a Bagley or an Ayton could. And if Mo Bamba figures it out defensively, then he could be like an all-time defensive player. And Jaren Jackson Jr., maybe, but he doesn't have Mo Bamba's insane wingspan and all that. But with all that being said, I still think pretty highly of Jackson. And we can get into the first thing with him, I think, is his ability to just switch on defense. And we're seeing it with big guys like Rudy Gobert, where they have trouble stepping out of the paint against the Warriors and the Rockets of the world. But we've even seen Gobert have some trouble with like Al Horford, a big guy who steps out. We saw Embiid have trouble with Al Horford. We saw, well, to be fair, Embiid was still putting up numbers in that Celtics series, but still, we see the value of a big guy who can step out and actually play defense there. I mean, hell, Clint Capella, his stock has gone up significantly because of his ability to switch on to perimeter players. The impact that Tristan Thompson had a few years ago when he was still pretty good at doing that. Even Joakim Noah, if we remember, was able to defend perimeter players pretty okay. We saw a guy like Hassan Whiteside, who can't do that, be basically unplayable against the 76ers in round one. Andre Drummond has had to improve on that gradually every season, and even now he's still playing catch up on that sort of thing. So to have a guy like Jaren Jackson who can come in and, yeah, maybe he's not going to be awesome at it day one, but I assume by year 2 and 3 he's going to have all the abilities to switch on to perimeter guys and actually have a chance. And that's huge, right? Because, I mean, it's pretty obvious. More three-pointers, small ball fours, and more pick and rolls. You need big guys who can actually survive out there. But the other thing that's interesting with Jackson is it doesn't seem like he's just going to be that. It seems like he could also be a shot blocker as well. I mean, the dude averaged like 3 blocks a game in college. He can block them with either hand, and I don't think he has like crazy athleticism. But he can still move pretty well, and then you combine that with his smarts, and you've got something. I mean, I think he could have some shades of Serge Ibaka, who at one time was able to kind of fly around the floor and be a real defensive presence, and even now he's still not bad, but he's declined, of course. Now, there is one fear with Jackson on his defense, and that's he fouls too much, bites on too many pump fakes and that kind of thing. He's also not the strongest dude in the world, so he may need to be like extra physical, specifically like with his hands, in order to make up for that, and that could lead to some more fouls. So there's still a fear. It's not a guarantee, but I think his defense is still a decently safe bet compared to a lot of the guys who could go like top 5 or so, right? And then offensively, again, I don't think he has the ceiling of a Jackson, or he's Jackson, DeAndre Ayton or Bagley, or certainly not Doncic or any of these guys. However, we've also seen the value of a big guy who can shoot threes, right? With the player that I never shut up about, in Al Horford. I mean, we saw it like against Philly specifically, man. Like Embiid was dead tired having to step out on Horford all the time. And, you know, if I can go back to Whiteside, of course, I mean, all you really need to know is like Kelly Olynyk was more valuable for Miami than Hassan Whiteside was. Significantly more valuable. And Whiteside gets paid, what, 20-something million, and Olynyk is getting however much he's getting. So if you can just simply space the floor, force the opposing team's big guy to have to step out or have someone else defend you, or just make the other coach think about, well, maybe the big we have in right now isn't totally capable of dealing with Jackson at the center position or the power forward spot. I think he could play either one, and it would depend on which team he ends up on. But if you can simply do that, then your value on offense goes beyond the fact that maybe he'll only average, I don't know, 15 points a game at his best. Who knows? So that's valuable. Now, that being said, I think there are some ways to counter Jaren Jackson. For one, you go back to the strength thing, right? There's a chance that he may not be the best low post defender. And if you have a center who can really physical him on the other side, then that's your way of getting back at him for his perimeter stuff on the other end. You may also kill him on the boards. If I'm going to mention Al Horford's good stuff, I'll mention the bad stuff. Dude gets destroyed on the boards sometimes, and it's possible that could happen with Jaren Jackson. So I don't think he is like a prototypical center's kryptonite. But still, being able to shoot threes and all that has its value. Other things on offense for him, I think his handle is not good enough right now to go off the dribble if the other team leaves him open or if they're closing out on him because he can shoot threes. But if we give him a couple of years, well, maybe more than a couple, to be honest, but eventually his handle could be good enough to where not only could he make the open three, but then if you choose to actually defend it from out there, then he can actually beat the opposing big off the dribble. Then his value offensively would be even bigger, you know? Now, to accompany that, the other thing he has to improve on is his, finishing from the not easy angle for layups. Whether that's like finishing over guys or having to kind of shoot around them and not just having an easy shot. He does need to get a little better at those things. And there's a chance that if he doesn't, then if I can go back to the Serge Ibaka comparison, he could be a bit like that, where he's kind of immobile on offense unless he has an open shot. And that's tough to have, right? Because if the defense is going to I don't know, let's say he ends up on the Mavericks, just for the sake of whatever, and because they're in this video. And the defense decides to trap Dennis Smith because, I don't know, he's gotten better on his jumper, or he's such a terror getting to the basket that going under the screen doesn't work because he's just so fast. So they decide to trap him, right? And then Jaren Jackson's sitting there, and he could get an open three-pointer, but then another defender comes over and forces him to go off the dribble, and then he just kind of picks up his dribble from, 17 feet, and then he gets it back to Dennis Smith, and before you know it, there's 9 seconds left on the shot clock. There is a possibility that could be Jaren Jackson's future. And if that's the case, that's not an offensive player that you love. I mean, it works, if he can make open threes, but it's not as good as it could be. And I'm not asking him to ever, like, create his own shot. I don't think anyone's expecting that from him. But you got to be able to do something off the bounce. But still, with all these things being said, I think with Jaren Jackson Jr., you can strip a lot of it down into he can hit threes and he can switch on defense. And that's a very valuable thing in today's NBA, of course. So I would still say that I feel like he may be the safest. That's not true. I think the safest pick in the draft is like Luka Doncic, because I think he's just awesome. But outside of the top two of Ayton and Doncic, I do think Jackson would be like the next guy. And then after that, if we're talking about safe picks, then I look at like Wendell Carter Jr. or Mikal Bridges, to be honest, because of, you know, like Michael Porter Jr.'s injury, the fact that Trae Young is Trae Young, and other things. So, yeah, I like Jaren Jackson Jr. a lot. I guess if I were to fast forward like 6 years, I think he'll be averaging something like, we'll say 15 points, 7-8 rebounds, making threes, being a really good defender, being a great analytics guy. Team is always better when he's in the game as opposed to not in the game. His teams are among the better, or maybe even like top 6 or 7 in defense every season. That sort of guy, which is a very good player to have, although it may not be the superstar talent that someone like a DeAndre Ayton or a Doncic or hell, even potentially a Marvin Bagley can reach, you know. But hey, that's okay. That's still a damn good player. So I like Jackson a lot. And then once again, new podcast. Things I want to happen this offseason. Small Deadpool 2 review. E3 takeaways. And that's it.